We went over the Nations League roster, and we were trying to determine what was it that Gary Smith said the Walker Zimmerman was. It was a fairly non-invasive procedure.
That's an interesting description.
Yes.
I don't really know what that means. I don't know how long that means he's not going to be available. So I don't know. That doesn't seem like a medical description.
No, Gary was hoping it was going to be 3 to 4 weeks when he said that may keep him out 3 to 4 weeks for a fairly non-invasive procedure. And we were trying to get to the bottom of what a fairly non-invasive procedure was.
Good luck on getting to the bottom of that.
Yes. So you are running around doing a bunch of different things. And first and foremost, this is the first time that we've had the chance to catch up with you since the announcement yesterday on 92.9 The Game about something very, very cool coming up on April 6th.
Yeah, I think we are the first terrestrial radio station to carry a U.S. women's national team match. I might be wrong. It could have happened before at some point. And not taking a network feed or something, and that's not even all that common either. U.S. national team, men's or women's, on the radio in English has not really been a thing, and that's a shame. Football de Primera with Andres Cantor and Nico Cantor and their crew, they've done an amazing job covering the national teams in Spanish. But we haven't been able to do it in English. And now with the Federation coming to Atlanta, it kind of makes sense with everything we're doing at 92.9 The Game to continue to push and try to get those opportunities. So we've got the radio rights locally on 92.9 and on the Odyssey app for the She Believes Cup. Jessica Charman and I are covering the U.S.-Japan match. And then immediately running to the airport to make it to our regular gigs. Jess will get to Charlotte in time. I'll get to New York and should be walking in the booth as we kick off Atlanta and New York City. Literally as we kick off, I should be walking in the booth. It's going to be that tight of a turnaround.
And obviously, this is one of those first steps for the city of Atlanta to showcase itself when it comes to national and international competitions. I know that the goal is to fill out the lower bowl, and it's safe to say that there's probably more than 30,000 tickets sold as they're chasing the 41 to 43,000 that's there in the lower bowl. But this is a quality doubleheader, and it's the first real chance to see, with this announcement having made with the National Tennis Center. It shows you where my brain is with AEW. The National Training Center for the U.S. It's a very, very cool thing, and trying to fill out the lower bowl would be a good first statement for fans of the sport here in the Southeast.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold. I think getting that lower bowl filled, I mean, it's already set a record for a She Believes Cup match. Getting the lower bowl filled sets an expectation for future national team games. And I've said it all along when it comes to the women's national team and the Women's World Cup that the Federation is bidding for alongside Mexico. I think Atlanta could get the Women's World Cup final in 2027 if they get it. Different rules and regulations in terms of who can host the final. It would be a huge spectacle, obviously. And I think the U.S. Would have a great chance to get the 27 bid. And then Atlanta would have a great chance to get the final in that one, considering they're getting a semifinal in the Men's World Cup the year before. So all these kinds of events in the lead up, especially national team events, it's a big deal. And it's not, not trying to like guilt trip anybody into buying tickets and going to this, but supporting these events and spreading the word and making it feel like a big deal in this city is huge. And we're taking that on from the radio station side of things. I mean, that's been something that Mike Conti and I have talked about over the years quite a bit as we've wanted to grow everything that we're doing. I don't like to do the who is the wrestler who doesn't like to toot their own horn, but toot?
Arn Anderson.
Arn Anderson. I will go Arn Anderson for a minute here because we're doing an hour of pregame for Atlanta United matches. We're doing an hour of postgame. We have 4 voices on the broadcast. It is, I believe, the most comprehensive radio broadcast in the league, and it is, done by design to be on the level of Major League Baseball, NBA, NFL, and those broadcasts. That's what we strive for. That's what we try to accomplish. And getting national team games and doing this as well, that's part of our mission to show that soccer on the radio is just like football on the radio or baseball on the radio. I mean, I was on with Dukes and Bell yesterday as the Kirk Cousins stuff was bubbling up. It hadn't been officially announced yet. I think he was undergoing the physical when I was on. But we're talking about the comparisons to Kirk Cousins and coming to Atlanta and resetting the expectations to Atlanta United, bringing in new faces and moving past the old days. And when you're able to have those conversations with people like the biggest drive time radio show in Atlanta, and they're on board with having that conversation. It's not just, oh, yeah, let's have our little soccer segment and then let's not have it mix into anything else. Those guys go to games. Those guys are talking about it. And when you can get those parallels between all of it, that should be what we want as soccer people. I know at times, and I understand it because, trust me, I've went through it as a fan over the years. We want as much coverage as we can possibly get because we're crazy. We're sickos. We would watch all of it. We would listen to all of it. But what changes everything and what makes it mainstream, which should be the goal? I don't want a whole bunch of coverage over here that I can access, but nobody really knows it's there. That's great. I like it. But that's not going to change and move the needle. What changes them and moves the needle is having women's national team games on radio, just flat out on radio. It's not about let's do a game because it's a women's game. No, it's a soccer game. It's a national team game. It is a women's game. It's all part of the same mix. Like doing what we're doing with Atlanta United games, it's because it's a big deal. Having the conversations that we have across shows, it's because it's a big deal. That's what changes everything. That's what moves the needle, and that's what we're trying to do, and hopefully it'll have an effect. And I think it has with getting World Cup games here and getting more people talking about soccer in a variety of ways, and hopefully with the women it'll be the same thing.
Looking forward to it on a bunch of different levels when it comes to everything going on April 6th. Jarrett, what's on your mind?
Let's talk about the week coming up then, since we're a couple days out from another game. Jason, I think Orlando played about as perfect as a game as you could have wanted from an Atlanta fan perspective. They had to go to Mexico and basically fight in a broom closet with a bunch of gremlins with only a knife in their hand.
Are you calling Gignac a gremlin?
I'm saying it was a vicious game.
Yes.
And
I'm not calling Gignac a gremlin. That was Jared Smith. You can find him on social media, Andre Pierre Gignac.
Mm-hmm. I adore Gignac. Mostly because Gignac went to Mexico and just never left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just rolled up and was like, this place is nice. I'm not going anywhere.
I like it.
But they played about a perfect game as you could ask for Atlanta in that it was tight late. Mm-hmm. And they still had hope into the 80th minute before they had it snuffed out. What are you expecting from an Orlando team that comes in here? I know you talked to Dax McCarty about it earlier in the week about the way that Orlando plays, but I feel like this game kind of changes things a bit in how they might approach it.
Yeah, look, there's a duality to Orlando, and I agree with Dax. I mean, we've talked about Orlando and Pareja over the years. This is a guy and a team that they want the ball. They want to control possession. They have guys who are good on the ball. That's what they want. Might not be what they can do on Sunday. And the duality of Orlando is that we have seen them at times, usually late in seasons or in big games, become a very difficult team to break down. They can be defensive. They can get numbers behind the ball. And I wonder, because of that trip, because of what happened last year with the hangover of getting knocked out by Tigres, this is reversed in the way that it went down, but it's still going to be, as much as it is physically exhausting, it's going to be emotionally draining for that team as well. So I think you're going to have to rotate some, but I kind of think they're going to come in and sit at least to start, and Atlanta's going to have to break that down. We'll see if that's what Orlando chooses to do. It's early in the year. Maybe they feel like they've got the legs to continue to play their way, but just have a sneaking suspicion that they might be a little more conservative on Sunday.
Maddie Cruz, first question for Jason Longshore. Go.
I got so nervous because I didn't know that I was already in the queue. And I was like, I'm in
like the Kool-Aid man, and I didn't even know.
Here, but we're chilling. I was researching. I was doing stuff. No, I mean, I think one thing that's, we're obviously going up against, it's this makeshift rivalry in essence, but is kind of a rivalry.
It
with
is.
itself. It is.
Yeah, I think it is. I know a lot of people, because it's what we do. We always have to put qualifiers on everything and downplay everything. I don't know why we do this in the soccer world. I really wish we wouldn't. I hate the cynicism of everything. It's like, it's contrived. It's not really a big deal. Saw it happen when people were talking to Sean De Silva at media this week. No, it's a rivalry. Trust me, I've had games in Orlando where you could hear people yelling on the crowd mic to the point that I got texts worried about my personal safety. If that's not a rivalry, I don't know what is. It's a rivalry. I fight this all the time.
Absolutely. I agree as well. I think there's always like that fire whenever we play them. Like it doesn't matter what it is. I just like I want to beat this team. I just do.
Mhm.
But I think with that being said, obviously Orlando's coming in with these tired legs. What have you been hearing? What is the expectation around this matchup coming up? Like what has been said? What has Pineda been talking to the team about? What is the team's overall thoughts on the game so far?
I think they want to be aggressive, and I think that's kind of an ongoing thing here with this group. I think coming into this year and just hearing Gonzalo speak about what they're working on and what they're planning game to game, it's not going to change dramatically. I think in soccer, and again, this is where those comparisons to other sports, it is important to dig into what makes it different. I think basketball has a lot of similarities to soccer in this regard. You don't game plan exactly in the same way that you would in football. You're not able to script plays, for example, and really say, all right, this team is weak on the right side of their line. I'm going to run at that 3 out of my first 5 running plays. You can't get to that level of detail in game planning in soccer and in basketball because it's a game of transitions. It's a game of movement. But you can continue to drill down on how your team plays. And that's number one. You have to play your game. And I think in the way that Atlanta United approaches games, the way that Columbus Crew approaches games, the way that Pep Guardiola approaches games, Roberto De Zerbi, teams of that ilk. And they're not all similar. They don't all do the exact same thing, but they all have the idea. We want the ball. We want to control the game with the ball. We want to manipulate space to create opportunities. You're going to work with your group to continue to do that better and better and better each game because that doesn't change. That never changes. There are little things that you might work on specifically for opponents. So, like I mentioned in the football analogy, if a team is weak on a certain side, you might try to focus a little bit on that side early on. I think Atlanta did that in the Columbus game in the playoffs, for example. I think they tried to do that a little bit against New England, but New England had a wrinkle that was fascinating with Matt Polster turning into an auxiliary right back at times, sliding to the right, and then kind of dealing with Thiago Almada as Lima stepped up. So it wasn't like New England abandoned the right side when the fullback went forward. Polster slid over and covered it, so they still had their back four. It was interesting, and it took Atlanta a little bit of time, I think, to find the open spaces and deal with it. So you're working on little things for the opponent, but you're just trying to get better at what you do. And what the sense I've gotten from this week is they want to be better and more effective when they press. This isn't going to be a team that's going to press all the time because they want the ball. They want to press quickly when they lose it, when things are right, when you're positioned right. If you're stretched, for example, let's say it's an attacking sequence where Almada comes over to the right side where he's typically on the left. Let's say Shande came into the middle and he makes the run over. So you're overloaded on one side. Ball turns over and flips. The other team is able to flip it to the opposite side quickly. You're not going to press there because you're not in a position to press. You've got to recover and defend in that situation. Those are the things that Pineda wants this team to be better at. Recognition in those moments. But when that happens and you're able to pin a team on a side, do that. Dax talked about that. I believe Shande talked about it a little bit. I know it's something Gonzalo has focused on, and we saw it to pretty good effect outside of a few times against Columbus. One of those ended up deciding the game. When a team has the ball on one side, you don't want to let them get out. You don't want to let them switch. You don't want to let them get the ball to the opposite side. those are the moments that I think they're working on to get better and better. But that's if they're playing Orlando, New England, Toronto, whoever. Specifically for Orlando, it's honestly kind of hard to prepare for this one because they are coming off CONCACAF. They are going to rotate, I would think, to some degree. And there's a little bit of an unknown about their approach. So this season, more than ever, I think you're going to hear from Gonzalo and hear from players. We're working on what we do. We're working on that. Don't think that means they don't look at what the opponent presents. That's not true. But the focus is on being better at Atlanta's game, home or away, playing their style. The secondary focus is how can we use that to exploit deficiencies in the opponent or protect ourselves against things they do very well. That's secondary, though, to playing Atlanta's game.
What have you thought about some of the newer faces? I know obviously it's a small sample size with just the couple of matches that have been on the board, but specifically Bartosz Slisz, Derek Williams, and Stian Gregerson. What have you thought about those three at the back?
I said it on Dukes and Bell yesterday, talking specifically about Gregerson and Slisz, but Williams is in this as well. They've brought a different attitude and a different vibe to the way this team defends. And that's something that was desperately needed after what we saw last year. We talked about it a lot in the second half, and it got a little bit better. Blocking shots, blocking passes, those kinds of things. It doesn't sound exciting. It doesn't sound like something that can decide games, but it does. And I think we're seeing guys like Gregerson, Williams, and Slisz, they'll throw their body around. They'll get physical. Slisz blocked a shot with his rib cage that took him to the ground on Saturday night. It was tough. You're going to get those moments out of that group, and that stuff's contagious. I think that's another element that when you're looking at multiple sports where I think soccer and basketball have a lot of similarities in a variety of ways. And I do think tactically there are similarities in that. But in the chemistry side of things, there is a lot of similarities between the two. You see it in basketball when you've got a hustling defensive guy who's diving on the floor and making plays. What happens? Other guys do it.
Yep.
When you get Bartosz Slisz putting his body on the line, Brad Gazan running out 30 yards to help pick him up and pat him on the back and give him an attaboy and all that, that stuff becomes contagious and other players do it. I think this year I've seen something that has stood out to me in these first two games when you look at the stats beyond the basic stats. Saba Lobjanidze is running his tail off this year. And that's not something that I think if you watched him last year, you would have thought of first. He's leading the team in sprints. He's putting in some serious defensive effort in just work rate. And look, some of that is coming from what the coaching staff wants, obviously, and they're convincing players of doing these things, which is a big part of coaching. But I really do feel like that defensive triangle at the heart of the spine of the team with Williams, with Gregerson, with Slisz, I think the way that they approach the game, the way that they approach defending has become a little contagious in this group, and you're seeing better work defensively from the entire group because of that.
Another couple of minutes here with Jason as we break down Atlanta United. Anything else on his mind? Jared, go for it.
As far as the way Atlanta's going to deal with a team that maybe doesn't try and wrestle them for the ball as much, how big do you think it is about finding guys off the bench who can come in and contribute in a game like this? So if it's a day where Xande Silva isn't on his Xande Silva nest, that you can be able to go to Edwin Mosquera or Tyler Wolff to be able to come in and just keep I guess terrorizing the fort on an Orlando team and just not let up.
The wing position, I think, is where Atlanta is at its deepest. I mean, with Saba, Xande penciled in as starters week to week, although I don't think it's Sharpie. I think it's pencil because Tyler Wolff wants to start games. Edwin Mosquera, now that he's healthy, wants to start games. Derek Etienne wants to prove himself as well after a disappointing year last year, and now he's healthy. So you've got a lot of competition there, which is great. And you have a lot of different profiles there too. I mean, Mosquera coming off the bench with his relentless running and 1v1 ability and improving defensive effort as well. That's important because it's different than Saba on that right side when he replaces him. Tyler Wolff is a different kind of player than Shande Silva, maybe a little more goal dangerous, maybe a little bit more of a striker mentality, but relentless on the defensive side. I think Tyler, out of the attacking players, is the best defender of that group. So you can get different profiles. You can mix and match a little bit depending on what you need in the game, what you need maybe from the start in some games, what you need from the bench in other games. It's a good situation to have, and going across the board, honestly, when you have a team that has depth and you have a team that has competition for playing time, even though you have established, you know who some guys are who should be starting with this team. There's nothing wrong with that. But you don't have guys just sitting on the bench happy to be there. And that's the difference, I think, with this group, where you're pretty deep across the board. It's going to get tested coming up with international call-ups and all that. That's going to be a challenge for a lot of teams in this league, but Atlanta's definitely going to be one of the teams that is most challenged by it. So in a game like this one against Orlando, where they might have tired legs and they might have to try to go to the bench earlier than you would think, Atlanta has the ability to do the same. And those wing positions especially are where I think they can change the profile of the way that they play.
Maddie Cruz, last question for Jason Longshore. Go for it.
I feel like we've talked a lot about the first team. I want to bring up the second team. They're playing also Orlando City B team as well. Does that rivalry kind of transfer over into MLS Next Pro? And what are your expectations for the first home match for the Twos?
It hasn't yet, although I think it will. The game last year down there that went to penalties was insane. Mm-hmm. I was on the road with the first team. I think we were in Chicago, and me and the digital team were sitting in a restaurant watching that on our phones as it was going down the wire and went to penalties, and Atlanta got the win in that. I think with the Twos, there's a couple of things I'm looking forward to this week. One, just the fact that the Twos are back in action in regular season. I get as excited about Atlanta United 2 as I do about the first team, because it's such an important piece of the club's overall development. That's where we saw Caleb Wiley as a 15-year-old break through. That's where we saw Noah Cobb as a 15-year-old break through. It's where we've seen guys emerge. And when I think back to big moments, I think it too is, alongside the first team. I think to Jackson Conway's goal last year in Huntsville, that was one of my favorite goals that I saw last season. I think to Nash Skoglund getting a game when you didn't have any other goalkeepers at one point, and Skoglund goes in and has a great game out of the academy. Stuff like that is just, that's why I love being around the Twos, and I'm so excited that we get to call Atlanta United 2 games here on Soccer Down Here. Again, you can listen on the Mixler channel. The Mixler app is a good way to listen as well. If you don't want to go direct to the website link, just make sure you favorite Soccer Down Here. You'll get notifications when we go live. We'll have all the Atlanta United 2 games on the network. What I'm looking forward to this weekend specifically is I think you're going to see maybe a little bit of the preparation for Toronto with the Twos this week, because you're going to be missing, we know Yorgos Giacomakis at this point. We know Luis Abram, probably Caleb Wiley, because the Olympic team will be playing during the window. That roster has not come out yet, I don't believe, unless it did since we started. You could be missing a few other players as well for that Toronto match. So you're going to need to have some guys maybe get minutes with the Twos that might be with the first team in Toronto next week. I think Noah Cobb and Efrain Morales are possibilities there. I think you could see even a Ronald Hernandez, who has played with the Twos occasionally. He might need to play left back in Toronto. So maybe he gets a game to get a little bit of that match sharpness. So I think you'll see some of that, which we do throughout the season with Atlanta United 2. That's typical. But I also want to see guys like Aiden Torres, who is on a homegrown deal, but he's 16 years old. He won't be in this one because he's away with the U17s, but I want to see him this season as he becomes, he changes from being an academy player who's playing up to a professional player. And that process takes a little bit of time. It takes some games. And then you have the guys like John Berner and Karim Tamimi, and Javier Armas and Daniel Russo, Matthew Edwards, guys who are on twos contracts, who, whether their future is here in Atlanta, getting to the first team, or staying with the second team, or this is a platform like it was for Kofi Twumasi. He goes on to Rhode Island. It's a spot where you have a lot of players who are very hungry. But what Steve Cook, Jose Silva, what the staff has said consistently in preseason is this is a really good group right now for the twos, with those established pros, with the first team guys who come into the group and are completely bought into it, and the academy kids who are coming up. They all mesh together really, really well, and they've blended together and created a good team. Alan Carlton as well. I didn't mention him. I saw a little bit of the training on Tuesday, and Alan Carlton was flying all over the field, just doing everything. He could have a really big year this year for the twos. I hope he does, because I thought we saw some really good flashes of his game last year. Get out and support the twos when you can. I know you can't make it to every game. I understand. You can listen on Soccer Down Here. You can watch on Apple TV, MLS Season Pass. The games that aren't there are on the MLS Next Pro website. We'll try to keep you updated where you can watch, but you can always listen with what we're doing, and we're going to have some more content around the twos as well. It's such an important part, and to me, like that's the graduate school for the guys who come through the academy, and that's the part of the club that, when you talk about establishing identity, and I'm getting beyond like tactical identity that can evolve. I'm talking about the club identity, the very big picture things of how you want players to play, how you want players to act, how you want these people to develop. You look at the twos as a really important part of that. So if you love the club and you're going out watching games, go watch the twos when you can, because you're going to get up close. You're going to hear everything. You might have to put earmuffs on the young kids, and you're going to get to see really good soccer, and you're going to get to see those guys who end up at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in their first steps as a pro. I can't recommend Atlanta United 2 and everything around it enough.
Broadcast plans for you for the weekend are what?
Let me see if I can remember. I'll just tell you all my schedule for the next few days.
The broadcast plans are death.
That might be Sunday night at the end of all of it. I can get to Sunday. Today, in just a little bit, I'm actually heading up to the Darlington School in Rome. I'm working on a feature on the U.S. Soccer extended national teams. Going to talk to Stuart Sharp. Going to talk to coaches and players on the power soccer team, on the cerebral palsy national team. Have a feature on that. You'll see some of it on Soccer Down Here. You'll see it on 92.9 as well on Off the Woodwork. Friday, we're going down to Perry. Griffin at Perry, high school soccer action. First trip to Perry. That will be 5:30 for the girls, 7:30 for the boys. You can listen to that on the Mixler channel. Saturday, Atlanta United 2. That's at 3 o'clock. We'll be on the air at 2:30 with your pregame against OCB. That's on the Mixler channel. And then Sunday, 6 o'clock, Five Stripes Countdown with Abe Gordon, Garrett Chapman. We'll talk to Garth Lagerwey in about the middle of the show or so. He'll join Mike Conti and I in the booth. That's been a really cool element that we've added this year in the pregame, beyond going to an hour, is having that conversation with Garth. That's not really about the game in front of us, maybe for a second. It's really about the big picture of soccer in Atlanta, in the United States, in the world. And it's really cool to get Garth's perspective on all of that. So that'll be at about 6:30 or so. Pre-game coverage starts at 6. Game kicks off at 7:10. And then the full-time report after, and we'll have players and coaches in that. And then I will sleep probably until Monday at about 2 p.m.
Attaboy. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, as you always do here on Thursdays, partner. We'll catch up with you soon. Business is picking up. If it hadn't already picked up, it's really going to
It's been picked up, and it's only going to get more picked up as we go.
Yeah, with Next Pro hopping on here on the SDH network, that just adds to it with the high school and everything. All right, my friend, we will see you soon.
Adios, y'all.